Hello, can everyone hear me? I hope. Firstly, I have to apologize for not being able to deliver my lecture in Bulgarian. I think you can thank my colleagues for that because they speak such good English for the last 6 years that I've lived here. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Martin Kidinov, Martin Tonov for organizing such a good initiative here, and it's a privilege for me to be the first speaker today. When I was preparing the lecture, I hoped that I would do something useful to as many people as possible. So I've titled it How to Get into the Games Industry, and once you're inside the games industry, how to improve your career. The first thing I want to do is ask you, actually, how many of you in the audience here currently work in the games industry? Raise your hand. Okay, that's easily more than half, I think. How many of you do not work in the games industry but would like to? Okay, that's good because it's about half and half. So I'm going to distribute the time evenly between those of you who are in the industry and those of you who want to join it. So yes, get in and start your career in games. I will give some advice how to do this. And get on means progress your career once you are in. I'm going to cover some of my early history, which may be of interest to some of you, I don't know, but it was a long time ago. So how did I start? Was it with this machine? This is the ZX81, my first computer, which I got in 1982. And it had a whopping 1 kilobyte of memory. As you could imagine, you cannot do a lot with that. I did have a 16K RAM pack, which made it more viable. And I bought this machine purely because I wanted to program games. I have no particular interest in programming as such. I wanted to make games. It is a great machine to learn on. Thank you very much, Sinclair. But actually, I did not start my career with this. I actually started with pencil and paper and dice, because this is what I made most of my games with when computers were not around. And my inspiration at this time was mainly actually board games. Here's one from my childhood, which we played every Christmas, Escape from Colditz. Advanced Squad Leader, which has inspired some of my later games. Of course, Dungeons and Dragons, first edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons I played back in 1980, 79. So I played a lot of games. Of course, a lot of card games as well. We played, every Christmas my family would play games. We didn't watch TV. Okay, getting back to my career. I actually started in game design, designing, I should say, a couple of games for this machine called the BBC Model B. This was a machine made and sponsored by the British Broadcasting Corporation for a television show. Quite a powerful computer at the time. It had a whopping 32K of memory, if I remember correctly. So my first game is this one, Time Lords, which is about time travel. You change time, you change the fate of whole races in the galaxy, quite ambitious. And then I did a game called Islandia, which is like a 4X game of expanding and exploring islands in a randomly generated map. So these are my first attempts. These were actually multiplayer games. There was no single player option in these, interestingly. I didn't know how to do AI at the time, and neither did the guy, my friend who was programming this didn't know either. But actually, the real difference came with this machine. This is the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. This had even more memory, 48K RAM, which is probably about big enough for a small icon on your desktop these days. But in that, we had to put all the program and data. 7K of this was for the screen space, so effectively you had 41K to program your game in with all the data. And it had an amazingly fast 3.55 megahertz Z80A processor. But this was the machine that actually built the computer games industry in Britain thanks to this machine, British games development became a world-leading game development centre. It was a great machine to work on. The rubber keys were not very good, but it was great. So I started making a lot of games for this machine. I was programming them. This is my first effort, in fact, in programming, a game called Nebula, which is again a space exploration game, programmed in BASIC. It looks very basic, of course. This is my next game called Rebel Star Raiders. This is a two-player tactical combat game, again programmed in BASIC. The entire playing area was just one screen. Again, just 2 players. So here's a game called Chaos, which is actually from 1 to 8 players, and you play the role of a wizard casting spells. This was great fun, and actually there have been around somewhere between 25 and 30 remakes of this game from fans of the game. They still keep trying to remake it for some reason. This is the first game that I programmed in Z80 assembler, which to actually progress you really needed to use on the Spectrum. I did all the graphics as well. They look really brilliant, as you can see. Then I moved on to doing some more tactical war games, Rebel Star 1 and 2. This now had a scrolling map, more sophisticated artificial intelligence, again still all programmed within 41K of memory. A Laser Squad, a more advanced version, still developing this idea of tactical 2-player combat. Lords of Chaos, another remake of Chaos but with more role-playing game elements. As you probably see, there's a certain trend in my game development here. I'm sticking to 2 basic concepts of game, which I keep developing throughout my career. But nonetheless, I was still working on several different machines now, in fact. This is Commodore 64 display. We did Commodore Amiga version, Atari ST, Amstrad CPC, so lots of home computers around at this time. And then the next game is really the one which was the pinnacle of my career, which is UFO Enemy Unknown. At the time, this was a very big game for us because it took us nearly 3 years to make it. There's a team size of 6, which is absolutely tiny by today's standards. There was me and my brother doing the programming and design. We had 3 artists at Microprose and 1 sound and music composer. And this was it. And this was quite a big game, and it sold quite a lot and was quite successful for us. And I set up my company, which I call Mythos Games, and we started to make some games more seriously. So next, there were a whole series of XCOM games now. XCOM Apocalypse is the next one we worked on, and the innovation here was that we had a real-time combat system. In fact, you could choose between real-time and turn-based. There was a choice in the tactical combat. Again, graphically, by today's standards, it looks very primitive. And then we did a game called Magic and Mayhem. Again, it's going back to the Magic and Wizards theme, which was a real-time strategy game published in 1998. At that time, the biggest trend in computer games was RTS games, of course. And this is the first time that I completely abandoned any idea of doing anything turn-based. So the next project is interesting because it didn't actually get published, but it did represent a big advance for us. I think we had a team of around 20 people working on this. Dreamland Chronicles Freedom Ridge. It was an attempted remake actually of the original XCOM, but it was in full 3D, and we were using, actually we were one of the first developers to use Havoc physics, which is quite common nowadays in many games. We were using middleware called NetImmerse, and we were developing this for the PC and the PlayStation 2. The reason it was cancelled, by the way, is that our publisher, Virgin Interactive, got bought by another company called Interplay, who then got bought by another company called Titus Interactive. And Titus were not interested in this game at all. In fact, they weren't interested in very much, apart from acquiring some of Interplay's IP. But that's a story maybe some of you are familiar with. So, but interestingly, this game had quite an advanced 3D terrain destruction system. Here's a little screenshot of a demo that we made. On the left you see some houses, on the right you see they've been blown up with some missiles. It was quite effective, and it used lots of Havoc physics. It was quite advanced, but we never got to finish it, which is a great shame. And at this stage I had to shut the company down because we had a 4-game contract with Virgin, of which we'd only made one, which was Magic and Mayhem. And because Titus didn't want to fund any more games, we couldn't go to another publisher. So, what I did then was go back to a very small development. This is a game called Laser Squad Nemesis, which I made with my brother and another friend of mine. So the 3 of us who made this. There was a few contributors on the art side. This was an interesting game because it had still had a turn-based aspect to it, but it was real-time as well. So each turn was like 10 seconds of real-time. And it was played by transferring these turns via email or via a web interface. And we sold this directly. So it's like a true independent game development and publishing. And we did quite well from this for maybe about 3 years, in fact. And until recently, it was still playable. I think we only shut down the servers last year. And then we made an even smaller game. This is a game called Rebel Star Tactical Command. This was made for the Game Boy Advance, so it's my first console game. It's quite a challenge developing games for a small console after working on a PC. And the game we had was a very similar system to XCOM in terms of turn-based tactical combat. Probably too sophisticated for a Game Boy Advance, but nonetheless it did get pretty good reviews. So after all this, I came to Bulgaria and got married, and then I joined Ubisoft. Now, Ubisoft in 2006 was a very small studio, around about 30 people in it. I applied to join Ubisoft as a game designer, and they accepted my application. And the first project I was given to design was something called Chessmaster, which I thought was a little strange at the time because I thought this game had already been designed. So what we did actually, we had to make this game very short space of time, was we created a series of small mini games based on chess pieces, which were designed to teach players how the different chess pieces work. So this is a little screenshot from a game called Fork My Fruit, where you had to use a chess fork to shoot little forks, literally, at fruits and earn points. So actually this was a fun project, and it was good for the studio. I enjoyed it because at that stage in the studio's development it was very useful. And we developed this game for the Nintendo DS and PSP, and also Xbox Live Arcade. Then after a few aborted projects, I worked on this game, Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. This was intended to be a DS game originally, but it became a launch title for Nintendo's new 3DS machine. And I think this was a great achievement for the team because we actually got the second highest rated launch title for the 3DS out of 17 games, more highly rated than, in fact, most of, all of Nintendo's efforts. So it did very well, and we were on, of course, a very tight schedule here because of doing a game for a new console, which is not even on the streets yet, is a whole added level of challenge, I can tell you. You have dev kits that don't work properly, SDKs that have bugs in them, right up to the point that you have to release your game. So, in fact, the whole team did very well for this, I think. And in Ubisoft, the studios also has a big experience working on a number of different consoles, a number of different platforms, and very widely different genres of game, from girl games on the DS, of which we published one, made one for the DS, and we're just finishing one now for the 3DS. Various ports, including the Prince of Persia HD for PSN. Some games like Chessmaster, which had some original elements. And Ghost Recon Shadow Wars is perhaps the first truly original title for the studio. The next project I'm working on, I can't tell you very much about because it's not been announced yet. But it is for a Ubisoft franchise which is very popular, and it's for a new platform as well. So that's my career to date. I will try and draw some lessons out from this. I'm sorry to bore with you, it's been a long, long career. As I started back in 1983, which I'm sure is before most of you were born. But let's get to the situation now in the games industry. A little bit of a change. I put a little slide together called Career Paths. Now, the games industry today is more complex. You have a number of different entry points, and the main points of entry here have been QA, programming, art, design, audio, even management. There are also a number of much more highly specialized fields within game development. Some of them are quite interesting. For example, you have some job titles like this, technical artist, or even technical designer. These are people who actually may have some programming technical knowledge, but also have artistic knowledge. And in very large projects, you find these types of positions. Certainly with Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed, which has many hundreds of people working in Montreal and various places, they have technical artists and technical designers, for example. I'm not going to talk about everything because I don't have a huge amount of time. So I'm going to leave out really the QA, audio and management side a bit, unless any of you have some specific questions, and concentrate a bit more on programming, art and design, which attracts the most interest from people wanting to work in the games industry. Firstly, I'll tell you a little bit about this guy. IDEO is a world-renowned design company. I've met this guy, Bill Moggeridge, because I did a training course with IDEO a few years ago. And he has something very interesting to say about the type of people that he employs in his company. He calls them T-shaped people. And he says T-shaped people are essential for innovation because they have a depth of competence in narrow domain. They may be, for example, in the games industry, you may be an expert programmer. You may be a very good programmer. But you have a breadth of knowledge and skills in related domains. So you may have some good knowledge of art and 3D modeling, for example, or animation, or even game design. Programmers who know about game design are very useful. Game designers who know about programming are very useful, and so on and so forth. These people can really see the connections between things. And very important for the games industry. If you are one of these people, that's great. If you're not, then maybe you can think about developing some related skills as well. So, presenting yourself for a new job, whether you're in the games industry or not, I would have to say that Bulgarians are not very good at this compared with overseas applicants. So I'm going to give some general advice. The main advice, actually, I'll go into some detail, is your portfolio of work. This is your collection of work that you've done or you have at least some major responsibility for, is your most important asset for getting a job and progressing your career. And this is not just for artists, by the way. I know artists are traditionally required to develop portfolios to show at job interviews. I think this is important for programmers and designers. Can even be for QA, audio positions as well. You need to present some body of work. And of course, if you've not worked in the game industry yet, this can present a bit of a challenge and a bit of a problem, but it's something that you definitely need to work on. So in terms of your art career, again, some general advice here. Your portfolio, of course, is absolutely critical. Only put your best work in it, by the way, because there is a tendency to try and put too much in there. You have to be selective. If you really have something which is good and something not so good, just leave out the not so good. And really leave out the crap, of course, but yeah, it goes without saying. You have to be selective. And the work you choose to put in your portfolio should be targeted and appropriate for the job you're applying for. You have to show work, if possible, that you have full responsibility for. This can be a big problem if you're working on big projects and you have a very small responsibility to do a small part of, you've done the texturing on this creature or whatever, or you've done some animation on the head of this creature. It can be quite difficult to identify clearly what you've done compared with what you've done in terms of a big team. So to be truly convincing, your portfolio should be, as far as possible, something you've had almost have 100% responsibility for. That you did this image, you did this animation. Don't cheat either. This does happen, I know. And it's very easy to find cheaters. If you put images in your portfolio which you did not do, don't try it. And you probably absolutely have to develop your own work in your own time. This applies as much if you're trying to get in the games industry as if you're already in it. And the basic thing you need is a solid artistic base. This is good artistic skills, even just good drawing skills, painting skills, whatever it applies to the job you're applying for, and some appropriate technical knowledge. This means you should know something about the tools that the company you're applying for are actually using, if possible. Some very basic and general advice. Programming, this seems to be a complaint of many people outside the games industry who want to get in, is that C++ is seen as something amazingly difficult. But it's not. If you want to make a game in a difficult way, I can give you my ZX Spectrum. You can try Z80 Assembler. That's quite tedious, I can assure you. So C++ is the standard for games developing programming. It may be changing in the near future. I'll show you some examples of where it might be changing. But for now, this is very important, and you need to study it. There are plenty of good books around for that. And as a programmer, you need to learn stuff constantly. This is a big problem because of the speed of change of technology, particularly with new consoles coming out, constant development of PC hardware. You need to learn. You could, of course, try the Introduction to Computer Graphics Master's Degree course, so for university. Colleagues of mine, very, very good programmers, are teaching the game development module for this. It's highly recommended if you can do it. But it is a master's degree, of course. The next thing you probably should do, especially even if you're inside or outside the games industry, it doesn't matter, is pick a game engine and learn it and build something with it. And as a programmer, your portfolio is important too. This means that you should be able to show examples of the code that you've actually written. Because, believe me, this would be interesting to anyone interviewing. And you should be able to explain how you did stuff, why you did it a certain way. Again, this can be difficult if you're working in part of a team where the code that you write in the games industry does not belong to you. You can't really show it. So you would probably have to develop this in your own time. This is why I say find an engine, learn it, make something with it. Build your portfolio. I've got one book recommendation here, which is out of all the books that you should probably be reading if you're interested in game development and programming, this is the one, Game Engine Architecture, by Jason Gregory, who's worked at Naughty Dog, among other companies. I know this is very much liked in Ubisoft as a book. There are plenty of good books on C++, by the way. I'm not going to go any more book recommendations for programmers. Okay, we're coming to game design. Game design is much more difficult because there are really no, at least in Bulgaria, there are no university courses which are really dedicated to this skill. And if you're not in the games industry already, this can be the most difficult one to convince that you are really a good game designer. So I'll spend a bit more time on this one. And again, you need to develop a portfolio. This is very crucial. And you have to make games. You can make a board game, for example. You don't need a programmer or an artist to help you with this, as long as you get the game mechanics done. You can make something with a game editor. There are quite a few here which don't require a lot of programming skill. Game Maker, for example, is quite a good one. I've mentioned it, Game Maker. StarCraft Editor is another one. You can pick one of these games which have very powerful editors. StarCraft is a good example. There are plenty of others, but if you can make something with such an editor and do something innovative with it, then you're going to have something very powerful for your portfolio. When it comes to game design skills, several things are important. Good communication and good collaboration. These can be very difficult things because you need to communicate ideas and you need to get whole teams involved in actually implementing those ideas. So these skills are very important. You should also understand the concept of accessibility. This is a very big concept actually. So accessibility means the usability of the game, the usability of the interface. How easy is it for the player to learn it? How effective is your tutorial system in the game? How well balanced is your difficulty curve in the game? So these concepts are all very, very important for a game designer to understand thoroughly. You also need to understand the games market because, especially if you're doing pitches for games, you need to know the competition or the things which are related to the idea that you're developing or pitching very well indeed. You need to do a lot of research. And in order to do this, you have to research games rather than play them. And by this I mean that you have to analyze how the game works and not just sit there and play it. And don't play them to the end because you're wasting valuable research time. Find out how the game works, understand its faults and its good points, and actually play more bad games than good games. You will probably learn more from playing bad games because you will identify the flaws which will stand out. If you play a good game, everything works in a good game, basically. The only thing you can learn from a very good game is that it can be very difficult to make one, probably, so you have to play some bad games as well. So, in terms of board games though, this is the game designer's friend. So, if you have experience playing board games, you will probably understand game mechanics quite well, because board games are the purest expression of the game designer's craft. At this point I'd like to do a quick survey. Does anyone here, how many here actually play board games at all? Oh, that's actually quite a few. That's very good. Very, very good. Okay. I'm pleasantly surprised. So, playing and analysing board games will give you a very good understanding of game design, and it is difficult. You need to try making your own games and writing the rules, and if you test them on other people, you'll realise how difficult this really is. You could actually, even if you're keen on FPSs and you don't even like board games, you can actually develop paper prototypes, even for an FPS game. How to do it? Well, you need a nice big sheet of paper, you need to do lots of drawings, you need to write some rules of behaviour for creatures and characters, put them on cards, have some system for resolving issues, and you can actually do, you won't be able to obviously prototype the dexterity skills in such a game, but you'll certainly be able to prototype different types of baddies, how to deal with them, the various mechanics involved in the game. And actually having a regular board games playing sessions will help you a lot here. So in my estimation, board game designers are, the best board game designers are vastly superior to most computer game designers in their understanding of psychology of gaming. So if you can understand that, you will have a big head start and a big bonus to your game design career. Now, being a successful games designer, this is something that I've thought about. I don't have all the answers here, by the way. But the main thing is that you should be constantly creating games and ideas for games. Actually, I'll do another quick survey. How many of you here would like to be a game designer? Stick your hand up. There's quite a few. Quite a few. That's good. Yeah, it is good. It is good. But it's tough. I'm saying, you know, you should be constantly creating games and ideas for games. If you're not doing this, then maybe it's not the career for you. It doesn't matter if your ideas don't get fully realized. I've got huge amounts of folders and documents full of half-finished game ideas. Endless. Unfortunately, I just can't help it. And one of my colleagues, Dave Grozdanov, is also very similar, coming up with huge amounts of ideas. They may not get very far, and it can be very frustrating, but if you're not generating ideas and concepts, this really is the foundation. Another thing you need to do also is to broaden your influences. I've mentioned board games already, casual games, and you need to play games that you don't normally play, again, to understand how they work. Particularly if it's a game which is very successful, but you don't like, you need to actually analyze what it is that makes it successful. You know, it's even an excuse for playing Farmville if you need one. The other thing which would be very effective if you can do it, and I urge you to try it, is to team up with a programmer and artist to make a game. And this will be very helpful for all three of you because you'll have something to show in your portfolio. So you'll each have the same game in your portfolio, but the programmer will say, I did the programming for this game. The artist will say, I did the art for this game, and the game designer will say, I did all the game design for this game. And this will be something very powerful you can show to a prospective employer. I said, I'll repeat this again, you need to develop really good collaboration and communication skills to be a successful game designer. You need to also understand the importance of usability testing or games testing. This is something that certainly Ubisoft and many other big games developers and publishers do. For Ghost Recon Shadow Wars, I think we used the Games Lab in Paris twice, where they take people off the street and they test the game for you. And you get lots of horrible feedback about how they hate this or this doesn't work. Actually, the initial feedback from our first testing on games on Ghost Recon Shadow Wars was pretty good, actually, very encouraging. We also sent the game to Nintendo, who do their own internal usability testing, which is very useful. They gave us a very big report, and actually they were very critical. They didn't think the game would be well received. They were wrong, of course, but nonetheless they did raise some good points that we were able to act on, even late on development. Now, when you're making your own game, you should do this with your friends as far as possible. And it's very important to watch people playing your game and see how they react to it. This doesn't just apply to games designers, by the way. It applies to anybody in a team. If you're a programmer, user interface designer, particularly user interface designers, an artist, you need to see how people react to your game and how they make comments, because you will always be surprised. You will always learn something useful. Just don't panic and don't do everything that they say. You just got to keep a level head. The other thing is about including the team in the design process. It can be difficult. One of the problems being a game designer is that actually everybody thinks they know how to design games, or everybody thinks they've got a good idea and a good opinion about it. And you actually have to use that rather than fight against it. in the early stages of Ghost Recon Shadow Wars, we had a team meeting every 2 weeks where we presented prototypes. Actually, we did a lot of prototyping. In fact, our first prototype was a paper prototype, which we made in the first week, and I played it with some of the designers and some of the other members of the team. I think in the next 2 weeks we had the first working prototype on PC. We didn't have dev kits at this stage, of course. And we, or at least I encouraged the team to actually play the game and give feedback, which was quite difficult actually to encourage them to play it sometimes. But actually, if you try and include the team in giving you feedback and ideas, then this will be the recipe for a successful game and a successful team. So this is my advice, at least from working in the games industry for so long. Level design. So level design is an unusual job in the games industry because it can mean so many things in so many ways. I'll do another quick survey here. Does anybody here want to become a level designer? One is, okay, only one. How many of you here are level designers? Raise your hand. Not so many, actually. Not great. Oh, well, quite a few of my colleagues, actually, but not so many others. But actually, for modern games, especially AAA titles, level design is almost becoming the dominant skill. But it really does fall between two extremes, and these extremes are what I call architecture on the one hand and programming on the other. So in a lot of projects, level design can be little more than building the layout of levels. Your job is like an architect. You need to understand the gameplay, but you also need an aesthetic sense. You need an artistic sense as well. But on the other extreme, a lot of level design is effectively close to programming. You're level scripting or using some scripting system which was built for the game, or even a scripting language in some cases, like Lua. In a lot of cases, the job can fall partway between, because there's not a lot of you here who seem interested in level design. I really urge you to think about it, because, say, in modern projects, particularly projects like Assassin's Creed, for example, Ubisoft, there are lots of people involved in this, and they are effectively making the game experience for the player. And it's a critical role in the games industry now. You could argue that game design is becoming less important because a lot of AAA games at the moment are basically more or less the same. They're basically split between two genres. One is the FPS genre and the other is the third-person action-adventure, or some cross between the two. And you see one mechanic in one game and it's repeated in other games, and these days I play a game and I think like I've already played it before. Apart from the fact the story and the graphics are different, the gameplay often has the similar elements to it. And what makes these games stand out is actually, in terms of design, is more the level design than the game design. So, and this job can vary enormously from project to project and between studios. So if you're applying for this job or even thinking about it, you need to do your research on what the studio does and how they do it. This is a very good job for T-shaped people. I explained before, those who have some artistic skill, some programming skill, some game design skill. This is a good job. So if you haven't considered it before, please think about it. Again, you need to build your portfolio. It's not difficult to do because you've got a lot of game editors out there that you can use. StarCraft is a very good example. Unreal, there are plenty of others. So actually you have no excuses for building a good portfolio here. Okay, book recommendation. This is for designers. There are quite a few design books around at the moment. I've read some of most of them. This book came out maybe a couple of years ago, and I think this one is still the best by a big margin. The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. It's also a good book for anybody who's just interested in the whole process of creating games, because it will tell you a lot about how games are made. He also, to accompany this book, he's got something called a deck of lenses, as he calls it. This is a set of cards. On each card there's an aspect of game design and a set of questions that you should answer for your game. It's a technique which is actually borrowed from IDEO, the design company that I mentioned. And it's actually a useful tool in creating your game. I urge you strongly to get the deck of cards as well that come with the game. But with these two things, the book and the deck, you have a very good tool for helping you build your games. And again, recommended even if you're not a game designer. You get in the games industry, you've just got to make something. Just make a game. Get a team together. I've mentioned this before. You can, at a minimum, it could be designer, artist, programmer. It could be even bigger. You can replicate a full studio. You can have a QA guy. You can have somebody doing the sound effects, the music, even a project manager if you want to try and replicate a full team structure. And even if you do a very short project, this will have something very good for your portfolio. And of course you can pick an engine to do this with. There are some great choices out. I'll explain a bit more about these in a minute. And the main thing you'll get from this actually is you'll learn a lot by doing. So playing games, reading stuff, watching films, they're not going to give you a lot. You really have to try and make stuff first. You might make something completely crap, but you'll actually learn a lot from it. And again, this will help you build a strong portfolio. At this point, I'm just going to give you an example of one of my newest colleagues at Ubisoft, Petr Svezdanov. He made a little demo. I know I'm near the end of my presentation. I hope we're going to have some time for questions, but I'll quickly show you his demo. Now, maybe I should run in this one. Okay. I'll try this one. It's slightly lower resolution. Now, Petr, he went on the Introduction to Game Programming Master's course. He's not a programmer, actually. He's mainly interested in graphics. So he built this demo with Unity. It's not going to win any awards for game design or programming, by the way. But nonetheless, it'll show you what you can do. It runs very slowly on my laptop, so I have to forgive it. So he built 2 levels, a set of environments. I'll try and jump over there. Oops, there we go. He built a whole environment outside as well. I'm going to look out of the window with animations, some animations for characters. Not much interaction. Whoops. Yes, I think you might have some problems with the ratings board with that. I'll just try and see how much else he's got in here. Okay, let's go through this here. So he built this with Unity, by the way. There's another guy over here. I think there's a boss guy at the end he's supposed to kill. There's supposed to be a spaceship arriving now, but I'll just shoot this guy. I can't kill him. Oh, that'll do it. So not much game there. I'll just briefly show you his second level. There's not much happening in this level either, but I'll just walk you through it. It has some animation. It has some idle animations for the characters here. These are, I think, they're supposed to be on your team. Didn't like him, he's sacked. He's tried to use some effects and some interesting shaders here. Forget what's up here, some kind of spaceship. Okay, he's done a made a spaceship. And over here he's modelled a robot. That's basically it, but he did this in just over 2 months on his own. So he did everything in the demo, and it got him a job at Ubisoft. So it shows you the power of developing your portfolio, and actually with a bit of effort you can do something very good. If he had teamed up with a programmer and a game designer, in that 2 months he may have achieved even something more dramatic. So in terms of game engines, you've got a big choice. Unity is absolutely amazing. And this company have completely changed the landscape in terms of game development, because both Unreal and Crytek have tried to follow up with also free indie versions of their game engine. Shiva 3D's a relatively cheap version for publishing. Torx has been around a while. They're all very good. Unity I have used, it's just amazingly excellent. Now just some advice on your CV, or resume as they call it in America, CV in Britain. I've seen a lot of CVs in my time, and most of them are uniformly terrible. In Bulgaria, there seems to be a tendency for everybody to use a standard template. So all the CVs look the same. They're all very boring, and I would urge you to just forget about doing that. Your covering letter is also important, but what I urge you to do is try and put everything together so that you have a CV specifically for the position you're trying to apply for, targeted if you can, if you're applying directly. With your contact details, you really do need a personal website, which will get somebody access to your portfolio, for example, very quickly. You actually need to start with a summary of your main achievements and skills and why you're applying for a job. This can be like a paragraph of text. This should be your main sell, if you like, to your prospective employer. You should describe also your portfolio contents and why they are relevant to the job. You need to make sure that nobody's forgotten your portfolio or left it if it's on a CD. You need to describe what's there in your CV itself. And then you start with your most relevant and experience and most significant achievements at the top, and you go down. I wouldn't bother doing it in chronological order. And for each project or job, you need to list your responsibilities and what you achieved and what you learned. Don't just state, oh, I did this or did that. If it's relevant, go into some detail. You don't need your full employment history. If you want, you can put it at the end. It doesn't matter how long it is, but you have to bear in mind that somebody reading your CV might not even read beyond the first half page, probably not the first page. So that's why you have to prioritize it. All the relevant stuff has to be right at the top, right at the beginning. Your employment history, probably most of it, is maybe mostly irrelevant, so you should leave that right to the end if you include it at all. That is my advice here. If you follow this, you'll have much better CVs. I haven't seen any CV done very well from any Bulgarian applicant. Overseas, it tends to be better, but again, a lot of room for improvement. So here's some very useful advice. Finally, yes, you need to research the company you are applying to very thoroughly. You need to know what tools they use, what they've done, what games they've worked on, what they might really be looking for in terms of skill specializations. It's very important. Okay, so getting on in your career. I know I'm probably going a bit long actually. I've got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to have to speed up. So I'll just go very quickly. I'm near the end. So it's a quotation from Jesse Schell. The secret to successful teamwork is love. Doesn't necessarily mean love each other, by the way. It means love the game. If you can't love the game, love the audience, love the market you're trying to sell to. And if you can't do that, at least try and pretend, because it'll make your life easier. For my colleague Konstantin, when he was working on his girl game, either he was pretending that he loved the game or he really did, but he was very genuine about it, and I think it made it a more successful game because of it. The other thing that you need to do constantly, and it applies again whatever role you're working in, is seek feedback constantly and learn how to give good feedback. You don't want to go around saying, you know, this sucks or that sucks. Very, very, very important. And yes, park your ego, be open, honest, trusting, and respect your colleagues. If that doesn't happen, then the team is in trouble, the project's in trouble, and these skills, because you can learn them, they are skills, are very important to you. Some things which give you an indication of things going wrong in your team, when people start saying, it's not my job, or the other one, it's not your job, or even better, I'm doing my job, but they aren't doing theirs. And also this sentence, that idea is stupid, or that sucks. So if people start saying these things, then it's a good warning sign that something is probably going wrong, and you need to try and do something about it. Getting promoted. Okay, if you're going to be managing other people, you need management training. The reason is because you are probably not going to be promoted because of your management skills. So I've just got 3 book recommendations here. The first one is, I've read lots of books on management, by the way. I can't profess to be a good manager, but I certainly read a lot. 12 The Elements of Great Managing is a general book on managing for frontline managers, and is absolutely superb because it's based on scientific data. It's not some woolly theory. So recommended for all lead programmers or somebody who's been promoted to a lead position or managing other people for the first time. Second book, Future of Management by Gary Hamel, is a bit more advanced, but certainly for those of you who are running your own studio, for example, this is an excellent book. And finally, Group Genius by Keith Sawyer is about creativity and how to manage it, and is interesting for anybody. So, conclusion. Is it any easier to get into the games industry than it was 28 years ago when I started? It's a very interesting question. Some things are easier, some things are more difficult. And I've actually come to the conclusion, no, it is not more difficult. Especially if you do stuff yourself, make your own games. Although the systems are much more powerful and more complex, the tools that are available are also much, much better. For indie developers, for example, everything is absolutely there for you. Tools and distribution channels. You've got the App Store, you've got Steam. It's very, very competitive. That's the main problem. But actually, in terms of access, it's easy. And if you do an indie project and it fails to make you a millionaire, you will still have something very good for your portfolio when you apply for a job when you need it. Okay, so that's that. If there are any questions, how much time we got for questions? 10 minutes, okay. So I will take some questions. Thank you for listening so far. If anybody has question about anything, please feel free. No, everybody is very happy. Okay, over there.
Do you think it's possible for a person who's never studied anything related to game design to get into the industry? Let's say game design. Yeah.
You mean studied at university or college or what?
If he's completely uneducated in the sphere, just play games, thinks he was boring, takes ideas and stuff like that. Do you think it's possible to just start from from zero and getting to game development or just game design?
It is
going to university, especially for that.
Yes, it's possible. But the main thing is that you have to prove it though. So that's why I'm urging you very strongly to just make a game. Whether it's a board game, card game, role-playing game, computer game, you have to show what you can do. And you have to research and study. You have to read a lot. So yes, it's possible. Sure. Any other? Sorry, there was some questions down here. Who was next? Dave, you got a question, really? Okay.
How important do you think reverse engineering is in the game, especially when analyzing it?
Okay. So reverse engineering. This was a little exercise we did at Ubisoft recently to take a game and to actually an existing game and then to actually write the game design for it. It's very useful for improving your documentation and communication skills and your understanding of game mechanics and how to communicate them. If you haven't done this exercise, actually, and you're interested in becoming a game designer, I would urge you to try and do it, and you can put it as part of your portfolio. Any other questions? Yes, Danny.
When building your portfolio, would you recommend that someone starts on a smaller project or try to be more ambitious and do something bigger? No matter if you're a programmer or an artist or a game designer.
Well, I suggest you don't do something very ambitious. As you can see from my colleague Peter's demo, he did try actually to do something very ambitious. The fact he didn't really finish it wasn't a big problem though, because he showed how much he could do within just 2 months. So when applying for a job, maybe it's not so important, but I would strongly urge you not to do anything ambitious. And if you're trying to do something as a game designer, the important thing you've got to do is try and think of one small innovative thing that you can do, maybe for an existing genre. Maybe you can take a match 3 game and make some innovation from it. Something very simple, which hasn't been done before, and you can prove that it's your own idea. Then this is much better than trying to do something which copies something else, is quite ambitious, but you probably won't finish. Any other questions? Come here.
If you are reviewing someone else's game concept, what would be the first thing you would look for a good story, for a good game mechanic? Or
the first thing I look to is show me the game. What can I play? I mean, you can't really evaluate a game based on a concept. You just can't. It's impossible. That's why I'm really saying to you that you must create something playable, even if it's paper and pencil. You can take a guess at whether something would be interesting, but you can't really judge if it's any good. So my main advice is, yeah, show me the game.
And also, on a related note, since you're very close to the UFO and XCOM series, what do you think about the upcoming XCOM game?
Oh, the upcoming XCOM game, okay. Well, of course, it's a major blasphemy, sacrilege. It's, actually, the game they're doing looks quite interesting, and it will probably be good. It's done by a good team, but it's just not XCOM. So why they chose to do this, I'm not quite sure. I mean, the biggest problem today is that turn-based games do not sell. I mean, publishers are not interested. Although some of the biggest franchises use a lot of turn-based games, and Pokemon, for example, is actually very similar to XCOM. You have like a strategic meta layer, you recruit a team, you have a turn-based combat system, and Pokemon is the biggest, well, after Mario, is actually the biggest game franchise in the whole world. But it's an almost impossible sell. I can understand why they went down that route, but I still think it's a mistake. Any other questions?
You talked quite a bit about the technical aspects of the video game industry, but what about budgets? Do you think they're going up or down? What if you want to create an independent studio? how much would a decent project cost? Could you disclose any of the numbers on the titles you worked on while in Bulgaria?
How much would a project cost as an independent game developer? Yeah. Well, the main thing is you need some food to eat and somewhere to sleep. And, well, maybe a computer. But apart from that, the costs...
About the payrolls?
Well, the best thing to do, I mean, a lot of indie developers just live on their own resources. Either they have a job during the day and they do it at night, or they have some savings. This is, if you're doing, as an indie developer, which I have done, of course, if you haven't got a publishing deal with a publisher, you're probably not going to have any funding. There are actually methods that you can raise funding. There are, the concept of crowdfunding, for example, is becoming more popular. So you have an indie project, you spend some time doing a really nice demo, you go to one of these crowdfunding sites saying, I'm going to make this amazing game, give me some money, and people will actually give you money. And then you can finish the game.
Yeah, but
well, that's the theory anyway.
Well,
how much money is it going to take? Well, it depends what you're trying to do. In terms of time scale, if you're doing a small casual game with 3 or 4 people, it's for a year. That's what the cost is. How long is it going to? How much is your living cost? Because your tools cost is going to be very minimal. Unity, for example, if you're doing actually with Unity, you can use the free Unity and publish a game. If you want Unity Pro, it's $1,500 per seat per person. If you throw in the iOS license, it's another $1,500. It does get expensive. But if you use something like Shiver 3D, which also has iOS publishing, it's actually much, much cheaper, for example. So the actual costs of tools and the power of the tools are, I mean, these days it's indie heaven, basically. Which is why so many thousands of indie developers are flooding the app stores with all kinds of crap. So it's not difficult, it's not expensive. I'm not sure if it really answered your question, but never mind.
Okay, thank you, Julian, for this presentation. Okay.